My granddaddy, on my mother's side, we referred to as Grandpa Holland. And Grandpa Holland was an important man in my life. And one of the things I remember about Grandpa Holland is that he always had change in his pockets. And I remember about Grandpa Holland that if there was ever a child anywhere around, he tried to befriend that child and reach out to that child in whatever way he could. And always before that child would go home, he would try to coax the child over to him, even the shy ones, and he would say, reach in his pocket and say, "Look what I have for you." And always he would take some change out of his pocket and give to the child, and the child or the children's faces would light up with that delightful gift. And my granddaddy would sometimes say, everybody needs a little change in their pocket. And sometimes he would say, everybody needs a little walking around money. Have you ever heard that expression before? I never asked Granddaddy about that expression. I never asked him about his whole thing of carrying a change around in his pocket. But what I knew about him as I became older is that he had some depression time experience. He was a carpenter all of his life, and I know about him, knowing that he lived through the Great Depression, that he must have had some hard times. And he must have had some times when he worried a little bit about providing for his family. And no doubt during those years, there was very little walking around money in his pockets. And no doubt, living through those days produced some concerns over his immediate set of circumstances. Zacchaeus, on the day in question, has tremendous concern about his present set of circumstances, but in a different way than Grandpa. For you see, Zacchaeus has heard that Jesus is coming into town. And for some reason, we don't know exactly why, I assume it's a God thing, he has an overwhelming desire, a need, we would say, to see Jesus. But he has experienced it time and time and time again. He's the shortest person in town. And every time there's a parade, every time there's an activity where large crowds of people are gathered, Zacchaeus is the one that finds himself at the back of the crowd. And he's unable to see over the heads of the taller people. So what he experiences on this day is nothing new. It's no new dilemma for him. So what exactly is this deep feeling of needing to see Jesus, of needing to figure out a plan to overcome his difficulty, that is, the inability to see over the heads of the crowds? Well, we don't know. We don't know in the beginning of the story, but we do know that he comes up with a plan. And we learn about that plan through the song that we sang earlier today, right? We probably learned more about Zacchaeus from that song we sing in children's Sunday school than we did from reading the Bible in those early days, right? We learn that Zacchaeus climbs up in the sycamore tree. I'm kind of guessing that because he's way up in the sycamore tree, and as he's looking out from the city, that he probably has the first view of Jesus of anybody that's in town that day. And he's got to be excited about that. It worked for him. His plan worked. He was able to see Jesus. But you and I know that Jesus never just kind of waltzes casually into town, kind of just waves at people on the fringes of society. Instead, what we know about Jesus is that he always takes time with people, doesn't he? And he always seems to know precisely the people in a gathered crowd. He knows the precise people that most need his time and attention. And Jesus could gather that any man who climbed up in a tree, who took this extraordinary effort to see him, needed something from him. And what Zacchaeus needed from Jesus was a change in his life. He didn't need change in his pocket, did he? He had plenty of that, so he didn't need that kind of change. But instead, he needed change in his life. Specifically, he needed change in his attitude about money. He needed to experience a change in the things willing to do for money. Change perhaps in the ways that he used money, and all of that would begin right here. It would begin with a change in his heart. Jesus no doubt knew exactly how difficult that kind of deep and abiding change can be. He knew how easy it is for any of us at a particular point to say, oh yeah, I'm ready to change, to say that kind of off the cuff. But to have permanent and abiding change requires changes in our attitudes. And changes in our attitudes are what then govern changes in our actions, the actions in our life. All of it, of course, begins with that heart transformation we referred to earlier. It's hard for a person to go from seeing every dime that's down in a person's pocket as all about me, to seeing those dimes that are in the pocket as on loan from God. And then out of that, having a desire to give back or to use that money for good in the world. It's extremely hard to go from being greedy to the point of taking advantage of everybody around you to realizing that love for God specifically connects with love for neighbor and wanting to do everything to make lives of neighbors around us better. So Jesus knew that he needed to spend time with Zacchaeus. The song continues, and the Lord looked down and he said, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm going to your house today. Jesus was criticized at that point, wasn't he? But he didn't let it stop him. He was criticized for hanging out with sinners and going to sit down at the table with a sinner, the very idea. But Jesus, of course, was going to be in the places with the people where he was needed the most. So many good things happen as we invite Jesus into our houses. So many good things happen as we're willing to sit at table with Jesus. So many good things happen as we have conversation with Jesus about our pockets and our pocketbooks. To have those conversations with Jesus about how we see money and how we use money in our lives. And the time with Jesus over dinner that night provided for Zacchaeus specifically that kind of time. Chances are they didn't just sit down and have a hurry-up meal, because they never did in Jesus' day. Mealtime was an extended time. It was a time not just to consume food, but it was time for relationship and fellowship with people over food. And in that time, Jesus was able to see more about Zacchaeus' attitudes, and Zacchaeus was able to have his attitudes, the attitudes and actions he had lived by in the past, to be confronted by Jesus. No doubt there were some painful moments there. Most of us guard ourselves rather carefully, and we try to guard ourselves and don't want people to get too close, and certainly don't want to let Jesus get too close to seeing the things that we know are not pleasing to him. So there must have been some painful moments for Zacchaeus there to let Jesus hear how he had taken advantage of people and how he had been willing to do anything to get ahead in life. It was painful to let Jesus see his tendency to clutch money and to hoard money versus doing anything ever to help people around him. So what difference did it make that day? That day that Zacchaeus climbed up in the sycamore tree. That day that Jesus told him he was going over to his house, and the two of them sat down to dinner together. That time around the table was specifically the time that allowed for a changed heart in Zacchaeus. We learn in that scripture passage that Zacchaeus repented of previous actions and attitudes toward money. We learned that time at the table provided time for understanding more about God's desire that we see everything in our lives as on loan for God. And out of a deep appreciation to God for all that He does for us, to have a sense of wanting to give back. Those minutes, those hours with Jesus provided time to form a plan. He had already formed a plan for how he would try to see Jesus to begin with, and in this time around the table, he formed a plan about his actions, what he would then do in his life in response to a changed heart. We heard him describe how he would, if he had defrauded anybody in his life, he would give back 4 times as much as he had taken from them. And we learn how he's willing to sell his possessions and give half of what he has away. Change in the pocket. Change in the way we see money. Change in the way that we use money. Change in our relationship with God so as to deeply affect our pockets or our pocketbooks. Do we think that Zacchaeus is the only one around who needs that kind of change? Certainly not. Probably all of us sitting in this room today need to experience from time to time that kind of change in our lives. And it's worthwhile for us to look deep into our pockets, into our pocketbooks, into our attitudes about money, into the ways that we tend to spend our money, and to ask God, is there anything, oh Lord, that needs to change? Do you think others, any of us, besides Zacchaeus, need to invite Jesus over to dinner, to sit down with him, to have that long, slow conversation with him about money? Well, if we're ready to issue the invitation, we can be sure of one thing. Jesus' response back to us is, I'm going to your house today. I'm going to your house today.